What is going on, everyone? This is Zach back here with another episode of Clutch Crew Sports. And here on today's episode, we are going to talk about the Denver Nuggets being eliminated from the NBA playoffs, as well as each of the three remaining playoff series going on. We're going to talk about some interesting things going on in each of those series. So I hope you guys enjoy. And now let me introduce you to the rest of the crew.
Yo, what is going on, everyone? This is Eric, your ranting co-host here. I want to try to take a break from the rants this time. I had a pretty long-winded, heavy rant last week, so I'm going to try to be a little more calm this time. And the Clippers are, while they're down 2-1, they're actually playing pretty well right now. So they're still managing to stay off my rant radar. So I love basketball, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. Hope you guys enjoy.
What's going on, guys? It is Connor, the co-host with the most, and while I don't love basketball like Eric, I'm still excited to get here and talk about this. I was getting pretty worried about my lock that I made last episode, but the Hawks are they're keeping me in it, so I'm not looking terribly stupid yet on it. So, but yeah, I'm excited to talk about these teams and what's going to be happening going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So, once again, another all NBA episode because this is the season that matters for the NBA. Weird that it's not the finals though. I still expect this time of year to be when the NBA finals are going on, but we're just second round of the playoffs. So because of COVID, the whole calendar is being shifted around for a while. Hopefully next season is more normal and we have a normal start and a normal playoffs and everything, but we shall see. So what we've been doing is whenever a team gets eliminated from the playoffs, we kind of want to talk about what's next for their future. And we only have one eliminated team that we haven't yet covered, and that's the recently swept Denver Nuggets. So they got swept 4-0 by the Phoenix Suns. And I read an article here. A lot of these discussions are going to be based off of articles that I've read, but this one is titled "The Nuggets, After Being Swept Out of the Playoffs, Face Big Offseason Questions." So, basically, guys, a summary of this article is them talking about how next year it's a big year for the Nuggets as a team. They have a lot of decisions to make. They've got a big contract in Aaron Gordon with one more year left. What are they going to do with him? You've got Jamal Murray, their leading point guard, who will come back hopefully sometime next season. How is he going to fit in? When will he come back? Because of the injury and the surgery, what should we expect from him? Because it's not a guarantee he's going to be the same player that he was before. You've got Jokic looking at a supermax extension. You've got Michael Porter Jr. looking at a potential max extension. And then you have an entire bench for the Nuggets with guys like Paul Millsap, Austin Rivers, Monte Morris could be a starter next year. Just a bunch of bench players that we don't know what's going to happen, if they're going to come back or they're going to just find a completely new bench. What's going to happen for the Denver Nuggets? So I guess I'll start with the more important question, which is Michael Porter Jr., because basically next season at the start of the year, he's going to be the number 2 option behind Nikola Jokic. So Michael Porter Jr. now, because of Murray's injury, is going to have a bigger role than he had this year. And my question is, what do you guys expect? So I'll start with Eric first on this. Are you optimistic about him being a number 2 player for the Nuggets? Do you think it's a downgrade from Murray? Do you think he's, a potential star in the making? What do you think about Michael Porter? What do you like? What do you dislike? And then how is it going to be for the Nuggets?
I think he has potential to be at an all-star level. I just don't know if I see it happening, though, because the biggest problem I have with Michael Porter Jr. is his defense. He is a horrible defender. And we were talking before the show about how Chris Paul and Devin Booker really exposed that in the series, but some people may not have seen it, but last year he was just as bad, if not worse. I mean, it just wasn't as exposed back then. I guess with him being more of a number 3 option, he wasn't in it. He had all of his like flashy dunks and cool stuff he was doing offensively that people kind of overlooked that, but it definitely really got exposed in this series. And it's kind of the problem I have with the Nuggets going forward, because Jokic, as great of an offensive player as he is, he gets exposed a lot defensively. Michael Porter Jr. gets exposed a lot defensively. Jamal Murray, when healthy, gets exposed a lot defensively. Like they really need help defensively going forward. But as for Michael Porter Jr., so he has 1 year left, right? Like he's like this wasn't his last year, right?
No. He has one more year for the team, and then is looking at an extension. I'll just read that and check and see.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, if I'm the Nuggets, like my plan going forward is, give him the early part of the season to see how he does, as a number 2 going forward. If it seems like he can handle the load, and if he's doing really well, then I would, maybe if he can work on his defense in the offseason, then I would look to see about giving a contract extension. But if we're getting like halfway through the season and he's still getting exposed on defense, and if he's still struggling in that regard, and maybe if he's not doing great as a second option offensively, then you look to trade him before the trade deadline and get something for him. So that's kind of where I'm at going forward with him.
Okay. And then I'll just ask Connor this question, kind of 2 things here. For Jamal Murray, what do you expect, I guess, from him next season? And then as far as the Nuggets bench, because you did pick the Nuggets to win this series originally, so I'm guessing that you thought the bench was going to be a lot better than they were. Do you think they should just blow up the bench and retool?
I mean, it is really hard because obviously, like you said, you have the contract issues that are going to be going on, like, possibly a max for Michael Porter, or possibly a super max for Jokic. I think probably what they should do, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to blowing up their bench. I mean, I know, obviously, I think if I'm them, I don't know, Aaron Gordon's also another wild card, but they definitely should probably look to blow up that bench and get more defensive help, because, and also, if Michael Porter's contract is going to cause an issue, like if Eric said, like if he doesn't come out and, really kind of try to fill in that number 2 role, because I expect, like, obviously it was a pretty bad injury for Jamal Murray and it happened late in the season, so it's going to hamper him to start the next season. But I think the NBA is definitely one of those sports where I see it happen a lot more often than, say, like the NFL, where players can come back and they can still be at that same level. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Jamal Murray didn't look like the same player, but I expect him to come back and look like the same player and to be that number 2 option, which is why I'm even more hesitant to even at this moment even consider a max contract for Michael Porter. Unless he comes out and just absolutely lights the world on fire, I'm still in the back of my head thinking well, I don't know yet. I need to see what Murray does first. If Murray comes back and is that successful number 2, I think he's going to be, then I don't even consider a max extension for Porter. I think about trading him right at that moment. So, and that can give them the flexibility to blow up that bench and try and bring in more defensive help, because obviously you're going to want to give that super max to Jokic. There's no question in the Nuggets' mind that you got to lock up Jokic and make Jokic happy. Because the whole team revolves around him. So they can. I don't even consider that max contract if they think about blowing up the bench, which I agree. Maybe they should do, because clearly my feeling about them didn't really get me anywhere. So, I didn't expect. I knew the Suns were a good team, but after seeing the way that they still even had their struggles against the Lakers, when they were undermanned, I didn't see this sweep came out of nowhere in my mind. I thought this was probably going to go at least 6 games. So yeah, blowing up the bench, I'm on board.
Yeah, definitely. They gotta do something.
Gordon's gotta go, dude.
Oh, for sure. That's why I wasn't a fan of it when they brought him in at the trade deadline. I wasn't a fan of it for them, because I thought, I honestly, Aaron Gordon,
it was kind of bad on both
overrated
sides,
too.
honestly. Kind of bad for the Magic for what they got, and kind of bad for the Nuggets, too.
But the thing is Gordon, he gets overrated, I think, because of his dunking, because he's been in those dunk contests and had crazy dunks. Kind of like you said, Eric, how in the bubble, Michael Porter would score like 45 points, and then everyone's like, "Oh my God, Michael Porter Jr." But then in a regular season, a real season, and another playoffs, it shows more of who he is, and he gets exposed on defense for sure. So let's transition now, guys, and talk about the series that are ongoing. So we'll start in the East, and we're going to start with the Hawks 76ers. So we are recording this late Monday night. The Clippers Jazz game, that's ongoing right now. But as far as the Hawks 76ers, we do know that it's a 2-2 series tie. So this is the one last episode Connor locked the Hawks to win the series. They were up 1-0 at that point. Now it's 2-2. So going back for a big game 5 in Philly. I think a stat is like 80% of the time, whoever wins game 5 when it's tied wins the series. So, it'd be an understatement to say that that's a big game. So the article that I've kind of picked out for this Hawks 76ers series is titled "The Need for Perspective is Necessary" as the Hawks trail Sixers 2-1. So this was written before the 2-2 tie. And really, the 2-2 tie, it's how the series has been. The Hawks have won these close games, and then the Sixers have kind of had blowout wins. So when the Sixers win, they seem to win big. The Hawks get these gritty come from behind, or in game 1, they had to survive the run that the Sixers went on in the fourth quarter. So basically, though, the summary of this article, they're talking about how, the Sixers, they have 3 max players on their team: Harris, Embiid, Simmons. They're a team that's like built to win a championship now, whereas the Hawks, they only have Trae Young and a bunch of really nice players around him, but no other stars for Trae Young. So basically, it's like, hey, the Hawks, they're an up and coming team. They won their first round because they were the better team. In this round, I think the Sixers are definitely the better team, but now it's 2-2, so anything can happen, and it's really going to come down to Trae Young having to be the best player in the series, in my opinion. He's going to have to outshine Embiid, and he was able to do that in this game because Embiid was relatively quiet in the second half, but in those games 2 and 3, Embiid really had his way, and the Hawks, they weren't playing their typical game of shooting threes, and the Sixers were just owning the paint basically. So, Connor, you've been riding the Hawks bandwagon all playoffs here. You picked them to win against the Knicks. You picked them to beat the Sixers here in this series. Locked it, as we mentioned earlier. So, for you, what do you think? Like, for the Hawks, like, to get on the next level, like, what is it going to take for them to get to that next level, to get to where they're a legit championship contender? Is it just Trae Young getting even better, or these other guys getting better, or adding in another piece?
I'm trying. It is hard to think about that, but I mean, because unfortunately for him, I mean, if I had to go through and it's so hard to actually really pick out who's the second best player on this team. It just depends on the night. Like sometimes it's Bogdanovich, sometimes it's Capella. I think game 1 it was John Collins was probably the second best. So, I mean, a lot of it really is these guys just need to develop. I mean, obviously DeAndre Hunter getting hurt really hurt them. I mean, my X factors aren't doing it. If you go back to that episode, Porzingis was a no show, and now Hunter's he's out for the rest of the playoffs. So I think the Hawks were smart in their minds to go to a more defensive style of game, get more physical with Embiid, because obviously not having Hunter, that loses probably your best defender when it comes to Tobias Harris. So they had to shake things up and figure out another strategy. But so I don't think it would hurt to bring in another piece. I don't know if they need to quite bring in, say, another superstar. I feel like that'd probably be hard for them anyway, just because Atlanta's not exactly a glorious destination, kind of trying to bring people to LA or New York or Miami or anything. So I don't know who exactly it would be. Obviously, I don't know. I haven't really looked at the free agency list this upcoming off season, but definitely need to bring in maybe maybe not a younger player, because this team is very young anyway. Maybe try and bring in an older veteran player who's still like kind of like a Chris Paul type player. Obviously not his contract or anything, but a veteran player who's been around the block, who's still really good, but not really a superstar anymore. But he can be there. He can like someone who can mentor Trae Young, mentor these young guys, because the way this team is trending, I mean, if they're hanging with a team like the Sixers with like you said, their 3 max players, I mean, the Hawks are headed for future success. It's only a matter of time. But I think an older veteran player, not another superstar, just to mentor the guys and bring them up, and they could be, looking like title contenders here in the next season, or even maybe 2 years from now, they could be title contenders.
And then Eric, from the 76ers perspective, like now that it's tied 2-2, what's it going to take for them to win this series? Like what are your most important things for the 76ers to do to win these next 2 games? Like, is it Embiid going off? Is it Simmons going off? Is it shutting down Trae Young? What's like the most important thing in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, obviously shutting down Trae Young, I mean, obviously they're not going to completely shut him down, but containing him, it has got to be the number one priority. Make one of the other guys step up and beat you. If Bogdanovich goes off for 30, then you can live with that. But you don't want Trae Young going out here getting 30, 40 points. But now I didn't get to see the game 4. I was at work, and I don't even know the stats or anything. But from what I've seen in the early games, Ben Simmons has been doing nothing offensively. He's like, I think one of the games I watched, he scored only like 9 points or something like that. I mean,
he had 11 in this game.
11. I mean, I know obviously he can't shoot. I mean, obviously he's not going to go out there and like drain threes or something, but he's got to get more involved in the game plan though. Like you can't just rely on Tobias Harris hitting all his shots or Embiid being able to get physical and make all his points in the paint. Like you're getting paid to be a max contract player. Like you need to be out there at least getting 20 points a game, at least get 20 and 10. I mean, he needs to at least be doing that, but he hasn't been doing it. I don't know why he's so timid. He's always looking to pass. Like when he drives, he almost always kicks it out.
Looking like LeBron.
Yeah, it's like
he's a worse LeBron, I think. Like he tries to play like him, but he's not as good,
LeBron, I mean, he's a better defender than LeBron, but LeBron can at least, shoot the ball sometimes.
LeBron's got. I mean, LeBron, like he's not the best 3-pointer shooter, but he's got a killer mid-range shot. So like you can't leave him open from there.
No, I LeBron having an amazing mid-range shot is debatable, but at least
you have to respect it.
But you can't just like leave him alone. Whereas like Ben Simmons, like if he's at the 3-point line, you can be all the way to the free throw line, and he's not going to shoot it. So like that's why I don't really like Ben Simmons. I mean, I know we're talking about kind of like what the Hawks need to do going forward. Like, the 76ers, we'll get to them eventually, but like if they lose or whatever or at the end of the season. But I mean, they need to move on from Ben Simmons. Like they need to get rid of him. Like Embiid and Harris are way better. They're way more valuable to the team. Like, but Simmons has got to start stepping up if the 76ers are going to beat the Hawks, or even if they beat the Hawks, like, they're going to get either the Bucks or the Nets next. I mean, who are both
doesn't
really
get
teams.
easier from here.
No, it's not like if they win this series, they get the Knicks next or something. I mean,
well,
they're facing the more elite competition going forward. So Ben Simmons has got to start stepping up.
Well, especially if they win and then like the Nets come out of the other series and they get all their players back healthy, like then it really becomes a hard task.
Yeah, then it's a big 3 versus big 3. But if you're just playing like a role player, then I don't know. Like,
I don't think anyone would debate that the Nets big 3 is better than the Sixers big 3.
Yeah, for sure. Like I've talked about him before, like Bruce Blitz, like on his website. This one guy that's on his show a lot, he calls himself MG for Mad Genius, but he says that Michael Jordan's the greatest of all time, and Ben Simmons is the greatest role player of all time. Like,
wow, that's pretty funny.
At first, I thought about him, like, man, he's max contract, and he does like, he gets some numbers and all that. But then I'm like, but then when you watch him play and you watch how he can't shoot and how he's hardly ever involved in the offense other than making a pass every now and then or
a liability at the free throw line.
Yeah, he can't make free throws. He makes layups and dunks every now and then, but that's really all he does offensively. Like, he's a role player. It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So, not a big fan of Ben Simmons, if you haven't noticed.
All right, so man, things have sure taken a turn in this series. So I'm talking about the Bucks and Nets. It's 2-2 now. I know when we last recorded, we were coming off the blowout Game 2 win for the Nets. They still had Kyrie healthy at that time. We all thought, all right, this is over. Milwaukee, they're gonna need to probably fire their coach and do something to shake things up. But credit to them. They won their 2 games at home, 2 hugely important games for them that they needed to win both of those, I think, and goes back to another Game 5 now in Brooklyn. So similar to the East, both these series are at 2-2, and obviously everybody knows now Kyrie's been hurt, and I think both him and Harden, are unlikely to come back.
They're actually. I just saw an article on ESPN. They are going to miss Game 5. Both of them.
I knew they were missing Game 5, but for the series in general, I doubt they come back in this series, even if it goes to 7. I think Kyrie can't play. He physically wouldn't be able to play this series, and then for Harden, I think it's way too big of a risk to re-injure it. So I think it's gonna be just KD, and obviously he has a history of getting injured as well, so who knows? But
well, then it's really over.
Yeah. Okay, so the article I picked out for this one, it's Kevin Durant gets his quote LeBron moment with the Nets as Kyrie Irving's luck against Mike Budenholzer worsens. So kind of what this is referring to is how it's referring back to, I think it was 2015, when the Cavs had LeBron and Kyrie on that team, and Mike Budenholzer was coaching the Atlanta Hawks, and they met in the playoffs. Kyrie got hurt in Game 1 or something. So Kyrie seems to always get hurt against Mike Budenholzer. That's just a weird thing I found out about. But basically,
is not always correlation is not always. What is that saying? Correlation is not always causality, something like that. I don't know.
It's something like that. Yeah, it's just because it's correlated doesn't mean it's what caused it. Just because he always gets hurt playing against Mike Budenholzer doesn't mean Mike Budenholzer is making him get hurt. But
yeah, is Budenholzer like a voodoo doll or something?
I mean, hey man, if you want to look at crazy, there's a website out there that you can look at crazy things that are combined. It'll be something weird the number of ice cream sandwiches eaten will correlate with the number of tornadoes or something. It's weird
but basically it was back in 2015. Kyrie got hurt in the playoffs against the Hawks, and I think Kevin Love was already hurt. So it was basically just
Shocker.
LeBron. Yeah, it was basically just LeBron and the other Cavaliers that everybody called them, the Timothy Mozgov and that and then that Australian guy, that Dellavedovich, yeah. So it was basically LeBron and a bunch of bums, and then they beat the Hawks. Now, granted, that Hawks team was way worse than this Bucks team right now that KD's going up against, and then they ended up losing in the finals to the Warriors. But basically, it gets to the bigger point here, which is about Kevin Durant and how, I said before, I think he's the best player in the series. I don't think there's any excuses for him still. I think he's got to win this series if he wants to be considered the best player in the game, because that's what a lot of people think. There's some people, the quote unquote bronze sexuals that Eric talked about before, they're never changing their minds. You got a bunch of people that I put Connor in this group that think Giannis is the best player in the game right now.
You have a bunch of really delusional people that think Harden's the best player in the game.
You got those group. You got some people that just be like, "Oh, Jokic won the MVP. He's the best player." You got other
Westbrook,
other fan bases,
triple-double Westbrook,
have their own favorite players.
I was like, don't even bring that up.
But But KD, he's one of the top 5. Like if you're talking about the 5 best players, basically everybody has him in that top 5, and then there's a lot of people that would say he's the best. So if he's really the best player in the league right now, kind of like the Jordan thing, the Kobe thing when they were the best players, they got to get it done. There's going to be obstacles. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be bad calls. All these things happen. But if you're healthy and able to be on the floor, it's up to you at the end of the day if you're the best player. And in the third quarter, it was kind of funny. They talked about in the article. I saw it too when it happened in Game 4 after Kyrie's injury. Basically, he either scored or assisted on like every single possession. Like the Nets players would play hot potato with him. Like they give him the ball. Here, get the ball, Kevin Durant. Give you the ball. Like he was basically the Nets players. I think they got to step up. But I'll start with Eric since KD was the original reason you became a Thunder fan. So you were once a big KD fan. It's 2-2 now. He doesn't have any All-Stars left, really. I mean, he's got Blake Griffin, but yeah, but his team, he's the best player, definitely. He's got to step up and win the games. What do you think happens? Do you think he can do it? And, what kind of a difference does this make for his resume if they end up winning the series and potentially a championship later down the line without Harden and Kyrie?
Yeah, this is going to be big for him if he can lead the Nets to a victory here, because obviously going into the series, even when James Harden got hurt, the Nets were still the favorites, especially after the blowout in Game 2. But then they were already struggling in Game 4, and then Kyrie goes down, and I don't know. I think the Bucks have made some great adjustments, and as much as I don't like this guy, like putting PJ Tucker on Kevin Durant has done wonders for them, because even though KD still gets his buckets and everything, he missed a lot of shots. He forced some bad shots, and PJ Tucker has really like gotten into his head. So that's the first thing that KD himself personally is going to have to do, is he's going to have to figure out a way to not let PJ Tucker get into his head like that, because if he keeps he played really emotional in that Game 4, like kind of what I see a lot of stars in the NBA do nowadays is like not necessarily flopping, but whining to the officials a lot and just trying to
pulling a PJ Tucker
instead of trying to like create his own shot. It was like he was trying to create a foul to get to the free throw line. I'm like, dude, you don't need to do that, man. You're like one of the best players in the league at just being able to get your own jump shot whenever you want. Like, why are you doing this? I didn't
not like Harden trying to draw fouls all the time.
Yeah, I literally saw him 3 different times in Game 4, like go for a 3 with a defender on him and then just kind of flail his arms into the defender as he threw it, which ended up being a horrible shot, thinking he was going to get a whistle, and then he didn't, which then led to a rebound for the Bucks and then an easy transition basket for Giannis. I mean, you can't do that. That's the way Giannis gets his points, a lot of the time is in transition. Like that's where he's best at. You can't force yourself into bad situations like that. So that he's got to get right in the head mentally. Like hopefully they use this time to come up with a new game plan now that they're not going to have Kyrie, because like Zach said, I would be shocked if he comes back. Like that injury looks pretty bad. So but I'm excited for this challenge for him, because the way I've always thought KD could redeem himself after leaving the Thunder and everything would be if he were to leave the Warriors, which was step number 1, which he did, but then go to a different team where you're the only superstar on the team and win a championship. Like you do that, like I would consider moving him past LeBron if he can do that. But then when they, he teamed up with Kyrie and then they traded for James Harden, I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter if the Nets win a championship now, because
if they don't win a championship, then it's like,
if anything, if anything, it's like the legacy would be hurt if they were fully healthy and lost. But now with Kyrie and Harden out of the picture for who knows how long, this is his chance to step up, like Zach said, and show that he can do it. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it, but I'm excited to see it happen. But like Zach said too, like the other guys can't just be like, "Oh, here, KD, you take the ball, you take the ball." Like he did a great job in the second part of the third quarter. Like he went on a tear, and if he can play like that, the Nets can do it. But then I don't know. Like I said, he got too emotional and took too many really dumb shots and had turnovers, and the Nets are not going to get it done if he keeps playing like that. So, like KD, I'm going to be paying attention to you, man. Like I'm watching you, bro. I want to see you step up your game. I'd rather the Bucks win the series, honestly, just because I'm not really a fan of any of the big three on the Nets. But if you can pull this off, KD, without James Harden and Kyrie, my respect level for you will go way up. So I know they've got a million other reasons to worry about winning besides that, but just know that'll happen.
You'll have Eric's seal of approval.
Yes, I will finally respect you again.
Yeah,
somewhat.
So I'll kind of go to Connor now from a Bucks perspective, like because we were originally going kind of like Eric, how he was saying how it would be embarrassing if they had lost fully healthy, whereas now you're looking at a Bucks perspective. The Nets, all they're left to is KD now. So from the Bucks perspective, Connor, do you think it would be kind of embarrassing now to lose this series now that you have it tied 2-2 and it's only KD now? You've got Giannis, you've got Middleton, you've got Holiday, you've got all your people except for DiVincenzo. He's been out, but with all those injuries that the Nets have now, is this really like a must-win series for Giannis, in your opinion?
I mean, it would. I don't know if I would call it embarrassing per se. Like, it would definitely sting for the Bucks.
Yeah.
Like, to come back, like you said, tie the series, and now you have this great opportunity. I think I would say if it wasn't KD that was the only one left, then I'd say it'd be more embarrassing. Like, if it was just like Kyrie left or just James Harden left, then I think it would be embarrassing because, I mean, shutting down Kyrie on his own or shutting down James Harden on his own is pretty easy for the most part. I mean, or like, because Kyrie, like, he won't get his scoring done. He might facilitate, and Harden's just going to hog the ball all the time. So, like, even though he may still get, like, 30-some, 40 points, like, no one else is going to do anything. So, and he's a terrible defender. So, like, you'll be able to win pretty easily. I mean, it's what happened with the Rockets for ages. So, but with it being KD, like I said, I respect him a lot, that he is one of the best players in the league. So if he can carry this team, like, it wouldn't shock me if he could. Obviously, we haven't seen him do it yet, but I mean, I just slightly piggybacking off of what Eric said, it would. I mean, obviously, this wouldn't be quite on this level, but like the one moment where I respected LeBron more than like any other time was the way that he carried that Cavaliers team to the championship that year. Like, obviously, he wasn't going to beat the Warriors with just him. Like, that Warriors team was unstoppable. But, like, just the way that he, on his own, carried a bunch of bums in Cleveland to the championship, I was like, wow, like, that's, like, I'll give you respect for that, LeBron. This, to me, like, especially going against this Bucks team, too, like, if he can do that, it goes up, like Eric said. But with the front back to the Bucks perspective, I mean, it would be like, if they lose this series, I agree. They probably need to fire their coach because clearly something's not working. Obviously Giannis has his issues when it comes to, like, I think you were talking about it last podcast, or maybe we were just talking about it like when we were playing 2K. But like how it seems like, obviously he's still a really good defender. He's still, a great rebounder. He's still a beast in transition. He's a beast in the paint, like blah, 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 blah. But like, as soon as they get to the playoffs, it's like his 3-point rating goes way down. His free throw rating goes way down. It's like he somehow forgets how to shoot when, like, no matter where it's from on the court, whether it's from like a standing at the free throw line and shooting free throws, or behind the arc, or, even some of his or even some of his mid-range shots. Like, he just forgets how to shoot come the playoffs. I mean, it's really, and like you said, it's a golden opportunity now for the Bucks, because honestly, the Bucks, like, they can beat, the Hawks, or they can beat the Sixers. This is like their biggest test. I said going into the playoffs that I'd be shocked if it was anyone other than the Bucks or Nets coming out of the East. And this is their chance to really, like, you've got a Nets team that's down and out. As long as you contain KD, easy, right? But, that's what we thought when it came to the Heat last year, where it was like, oh, all you got to really do is contain Jimmy Butler, and then, this Bucks team should easily, go on to the next round. But then they couldn't even do that, or like Giannis was looking even worse. And then, like, Giannis was doing bad, and then Middleton would have his off nights, because Middleton has his off nights for sure. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he's definitely not a consistent number 2 scorer for them. So, it's something that really needs to happen for them. Again, I don't know if it would be embarrassing per se, but it would just be like,
Yeah,
it would lead to a lot of changes for them. Like, I think, again, like, definitely the coach would be gone. And I think they would really need to. I think a lot of their players would be gone. Like, they'd probably find a way to trade Brooke Lopez. They'd probably find a way to, trade PJ Tucker. They'd probably. I mean, I think they'd keep Holiday. But honestly, if they go down like this, I wouldn't be surprised if they even started trying to find ways to maybe trade Middleton for something.
oh yeah,
Because I
I
just feel like he
agree.
has too many off nights. Like, okay, if you're really supposed to be this, like, he looks like an all-star when he plays, his normal way, but he's just so inconsistent. And Giannis really needs that second, really consistent scorer. So it would lead to a lot of shakeups in Milwaukee if they lost this series.
For sure. All right, so let's get now to the last series that's still going on to talk about, and that's Clippers Jazz. Jazz are up 2-1 as we record this. I know they got a lead right now, pretty sizable one against Utah, but hey, they're the Clippers, so I'm not counting it until it's final. So it's 2-1 Jazz right now as we talk.
Pandemic P hasn't showed up yet.
Yeah, Kawhi just drilled a three as I was watching it, but yeah, so it's 2-1 Jazz right now, and the article that I have is kind of talking about how different Game 3 was for the Clippers. So basically, Game 1, really the first two games they were both kind of close games that the Jazz won at home, and I thought at the time that they were really like must-win games for the Jazz because Mike Conley's injury has been really mysterious as far as what they've been saying. It's been, oh, he's out for this game. He'll be questionable the next one. Okay, he's definitely going to be back by Game 4. He's not playing in Game 4 right now. So it's who knows what Mike Conley's actual injury is. We really don't know. And so Donovan Mitchell also, he got hurt and re-aggravated the injury he had in the regular season. So he's hobbled. He's definitely not 100%. So this really comes down now. Kawhi and Paul George, they are in a great spot, I think, to take the series if the Jazz aren't healthy and if they show up. And it seems like they've been showing up more recently in these second two games in LA than they did the first two games. And this just gets back to the whole Clippers conversation about like how on paper this team could compete for a title and win a championship. No question about it. But we look at the team and there's no like quote unquote closers on the team. There's no real good clutch players. I mean, because Kawhi, he's very inconsistent in the clutch. I'll say that. There was times in the Dallas series he was great. There were other times, there were games that they lost that he was pathetic in. And then we all know Paul George is terrible in the clutch. Pandemic P, that's how he got that nickname. So I'll swing it over to Eric, the Clippers believer, and you've been believing in this team more than Connor and I have. So what's your expectations for this? Or do you feel good about your Clippers chances here to win the series? Or are you worried?
Well, obviously after the first two games, I was pretty worried. Just like the Mavericks series, man, they lost the first two games, but then they came back and had a pretty dominant showing there in Game 3, so that was a relief to see. But that's just what I don't understand. That, like you talked about the inconsistencies. I just obviously no team's going to go out and win by 20 plus points every game. Like even super teams have not been able to do that like all the time. But I mean, this team should be so much better than they are. I just don't understand why they're so inconsistent. Like, but I'm still believing in them. I mean, they're up pretty big right now. The biggest thing for the Clippers, I think, to win the series is they just have to find a way to contain Mitchell. I mean, he's been, even with the re-aggravation of the injury, he's been playing pretty good here. He actually has 17 points in the second quarter, which has been pretty amazing. It's been pretty cool to watch, but no one else on the Jazz is really doing much. So you contain Mitchell, you beat the Jazz. I mean, that they've got other good pieces around it, but it's kind of like what we talked about with the Sixers and Hawks, how like what the Sixers really need to do is contain Trae Young as best as possible and force someone else to step up. Like, I think it's the same thing for the Clippers to beat the Jazz. You just got to, even with Mitchell going off, like the Clippers still have a big lead in this game. But I mean, if he wasn't going off this quarter, the lead would be even bigger. I mean, so force someone else to beat you, contain Mitchell, and don't let the Jazz hit so many threes because they're good at that too. Like they were one of the best 3-point shooting teams. Yeah, go ahead.
I have another like a quick question for you. Do you think that their defense is overrated?
The Jazz or
Clippers? The Clippers.
The Clippers, yeah. I mean, their defense is definitely overrated. I mean, you look on paper and you think, man, they got Kawhi, who's always been a top defender, PG, who's been known for a defender, like Patrick Beverly, which he's definitely an overrated defender in my opinion, but that's supposed to be like the strength of his game, that he's a good defender.
His strength, his biggest strength now is clapping. He averages 100 claps a game.
Yeah, right. I mean, so it's he does do that a lot. But I do think their defense is overrated. I mean, I've noticed though the key to success against the Clippers is their transition defense is really bad. Like if you can score quick on them, like that's the recipe for success to be the Clippers. Now, when you're constantly in half court sets and having to score on them, it's a lot harder then. That's when their defense is better. But when you force, when you get, Pandemic P showing up and, when bad Kawhi shows up and they're getting a lot of turnovers and you can score easy buckets in transition, that's the recipe to beat the Clippers. Like for example, in this game right now, the Clippers are pretty big because they're actually making their shots, which is then forcing the Jazz to have to run a half court offense, and they haven't really been that successful with it. But then like towards the end of the half here, the Clippers have been missing some shots. They had a couple turnovers, and then the Jazz hit like 4 or 5 threes. So even though they're still down by like 20, they're still in the game because of these, this run of threes they're hitting. So the Clippers transition defense is really bad. So that's how you beat them. But I am worried still. I don't, the Clippers are obviously going to have to win a game in Utah to win the series. And the Jazz fans definitely seem to be living rent free in Paul George's head right now. Like with the whole like pandemic P chance and playoff P chance, he's been great at home this series so far, but in the 2 games in Utah, he was terrible. So, but if Kawhi and PG are both on their game, then the Jazz are not going to win the series. So, but I don't know. I just want to avoid the rant. I mean, I already went off on LeBron for like 20 minutes last week, and I kind of went off on Ben Simmons a little bit this episode. So
yeah, you did.
I'm trying to avoid. I mean, I'm trying to. I am the ranter, but I don't want to always rant.
Gotta save it for when it's real special. Okay.
For sure.
Yeah. So Connor, my question is for you is like we know Mitchell is vitally important, but who else do you think is like the new X factor for the Jazz? Like Clarkson, Gobert, Ingles, somebody else? Like when what's his face, Mike Conley comes back, if he does, what would be that other X factor you would pick?
I mean, it would honestly probably be, for me, it's so hard for me. I'm picking between Conley and Clarkson, honestly. Like, because Gobert, like, he's obviously, like, he's always going to be his usual, like, defensive player of the year self. Like, he's never really a big offensive threat. As long as he holds down the paint, that's fine. But that's not, like, where the game is going to be won or lost here. It's not like, the Clippers have a dominant big man that Gobert needs to contain. Like, he's not going to be out there guarding Kawhi or PG. So, yeah, I don't know. For me, it has to be either Conley or Clarkson. Like, someone else has to, it's kind of like what we've talked about for the Hawks, too. Like, I don't know, the series feels very similar in a lot of ways. Like, someone else has to step up. Like, Clarkson, especially, like, in this game. I mean, Clarkson, he was really good in game 2 of this series, but he's kind of been, like, he's been really absent, like, game 1, game 3, and especially now, he's, like, 2 of 9 in this game. Like, he's been horribly absent from this game. He's supposed to be, their sixth man coming off the bench, and he's not putting up the points. So it's really the Jazz are missing Mike Conley here because, he's another scoring option for them that can really, if Mitchell's having an off night or if Mitchell's like, they're finally starting to contain him, then Conley can start getting those points for them. So they just have to find another offensive option. And yeah, I don't know what's going on with Conley. It's like I keep seeing like that he's got like some sort of hamstring injury, like, oh, he's out because of hamstring tightness or something. I'm like, okay, well, that's obviously not it. Like, your hamstring being a little tight isn't going to keep you out of a playoff game most of the time.
Like, Trevor Lawrence has hamstring tightness, and they said he could play if they had to play a game right now. So
Right. Yeah. So it's like, hamstring tightness doesn't keep you out of anything. So it's especially not the playoffs. It's just very strange, like you said, what's going on with him. But, I mean, if he comes back, then I think it's, watch out Clippers. But the thing about the Jazz really that they need to fix more than anything, I mean, this kind of goes with like finding that second score, but they have to find a way to stop going on these runs where they miss like 15 shots in a row or something. Like I was looking, at how the Clippers at one point almost were getting up to like a 30-point lead at one point. And it's because the Jazz were like 23% from the field or something. They were like 8 of like 33 or something. It's like you can't be doing that, especially for, I know the NBA doesn't give out any trophy. This is like a hockey reference, but like the President's Trophy winner of the NBA was the Jazz this year. They had the best record. It's like you get this team that's got the best record and they're out here shooting 23% through the first quarter. It's just not something that is becoming of their nature of their team. So they just got to find a way to stop doing that. I mean, obviously they were able to overcome it somehow in game 2. I don't know how they did, but some magical
credit
thing
the fans.
happened.
They play really well in Utah.
Yeah, it's like credit the fans and credit Pandemic P for showing up as well. So I mean, obviously that could still happen in this game, but if they can find a way to fix that, then I don't see any reason why the Jazz can't go on. I mean, I don't know. I feel like they're just kind of gonna be that like. I feel like with the Nets, like trying to compare them to the Nets here, probably. Utah coming in was the best team in the West, and even though the Nets weren't the 1 seed, they were probably still the best team in the East. The Nets, like when the Nets are on and they win, we're expecting them to get like dominant wins, like like you said, because it's a super team. They should be out here when everyone's healthy. They should be winning by like 15, 20, which they usually do when they're on. But I think the Jazz are going to kind of be that team where. Obviously they won't do this missing 15, 20 shots in a row or whatever, but like they're going to be that team that I feel like they're going to win a lot of close games on their way to the NBA finals. And we're going to kind of look at them and we're going to think like, oh man, like, I don't know if this team can do it. Like they've been in so many close games. Like they're not the team we thought they were, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's just the kind of team they are right now. Like they're just going to be that team that's going to win these tough, close games. They're going to win these gritty games. And that's how they're going to get there. But obviously need to fix said it like 5 times now, missing 20 shots in a row problems that they have.
Yeah. All right, guys. Great episode. We will be back next week to talk. Hopefully, we'll be talking about some losers of the playoffs. We're going to hopefully have some previews to talk about and also maybe a game 7 if that's possible for us to talk about on the next podcast. Not sure, but until then, guys, remember, be clutch.
Bye.